Okay, welcome everyone. This is one of the things that Shadowserver is starting to do. We're doing videos. We're getting the videos up on a YouTube channel. We're doing videos for specific areas and events. And myself as a network engineer, I go to different network operations groups. So I was at Philippines NOG, was great. 30 years of the Philippine internet. So one of the things we're doing is the week after the NOG, we're doing these talks because at a NOG, you're trying to squeeze a lot of information in. So that's what this talk is about. It's being recorded. We've got some good participants in from the Philippines, where I was specifically targeting and inviting, our peers and our network engineers and security people in the Philippines. Everybody who sees this and attends this, share it. In other words, go out to the recording, from this recording here that's over on YouTube, and share it around because it's really important, the stuff we're going to be doing. The slides are all available to everyone, right? So I'll repost right now for everybody here in the Zoom on there. I'll post that in there, and the details of the slides will also be in the YouTube video. All right, so that's what this is about. Here's some key links. I'll be plugging this. This is like in the notes of the webinar. It's also in the notes of the chat on this particular Zoom. Key things to do right now, right? So as you're listening to me, sign up to the public mailing list for Shadowserver, and I'll explain why this is. Sign up to the different social media tools, and then subscribe to the YouTube channel, because this is one of many, many different things that's going to help you out as cost-effective cybersecurity that works. The key thing with that. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to cover who is Shadowserver. I mean, a lot of I'll talk to people all over the world, and they are cybersecurity professionals and have no idea who Shadowserver is. Which always, in a way, surprises me, because Shadowserver has been critical to every network I've been working on for the last 20 years since Shadowserver has been out there. It's helped secure my network. It saved me millions of dollars of damages, right? Some of the biggest break-ins you see in the news in Southeast Asia could have been prevented if they subscribe to the Shadowserver reports, which are free to use, and went out there and fixed the basics. All right. So we're going to review some of these latest Shadowserver reports and see how they're used, and kind of give some examples with it, and then to show you how to sign up. Everybody here listening to this, if you're listening to this and you're not signed up for the Shadowserver reports, they're free, you are missing out. If you are a security professional and you haven't signed up for the Shadowserver reports, you could be liable. There's a new Indonesian law coming out. You could be liable if you don't, do the basics of what you need to do. When we get to the end of this session, we're going to turn off the recording. So sorry, people listening this to YouTube. There'll be hopefully interesting Q&A at the end of it. That's one of the reasons to sign up to the live session. And this session is geared towards GMT+8. So in other words, it's an ASEAN focus. One of the other things we're doing with the Shadowserver team with our videos is we're not being like, US centric, European centric. We're hitting our constituents, because our constituents are all over the world. So we're doing, ASEAN one, this particular one. I have colleagues doing it over in Africa time zones. Hopefully soon Spanish language for Latin America, things like that. So these are sort of activities we're doing. Now, who am I? My name is Barry Green. I've been doing networking for like decades, going 40 years now. So I've got a lot of different experience, and I try to apply that experience in the nonprofit cyber world, the world like in Shadowserver and other groups, to help you as younger professionals actually have the shortcuts, tap into my experience, and make it easier on you and your operations. Now, everything here is TLP clear. If you don't know traffic light protocol, check out this link. If you are a network professional or a security professional, you need to understand the traffic light protocol. It's how we use to communicate information and keep information away from the bad guys. This particular one, we don't care if the bad guys see it, right? So share it widely. Share it with your friends and say, hey, go check this out. Check out these slides. Go watch the video. That sort of thing. Get the word out with that stuff, right? Now, as I mentioned before, Shadowserver shows up at a lot of different events and speaking and meet people. So 30 years of the internet in Philippines, PHNOG. This is like, I think, the 15th one of the PHNOG. Sign up to the Facebook group. Hopefully we can see you next year. So this is, it's a great activity. It was really exciting. It was the largest PHNOG participants. And I think the Philippines NOGs is special. The dynamics and everybody talking and interacting with each other and getting to know each other. And one of the things I emphasize in security is that your number one tool of helping you out are your peers, your colleagues, people who you can call up and get help with, right? That's the number one. And forums like PHNOG and other conferences and events like that are key places to actually build that network of colleagues and peers who's going to help you out when you're in a crunch, when you're in a bind, you need help, right? So that's what these things are about. Now, what are we about with these work? Honestly, Shadowservers, we're trying to get more people using the data sets. So this is a couple of weeks old. You can look at, yes, there's a lot of green in there of IP addresses that are covered who are organizations getting reports, but it's not so much the number of addresses because we got several big service providers. It's actually the number of autonomous systems we look at. There's a lot of organizations out there that should be getting it. And we got a new feature coming out in a couple of months where you don't need to worry about autonomous system. You can just put in your domain name. And then what Shadowserver would do is take your domain name, and then we go out there and reverse and walk down the tree of the domain name, pull all the IP addresses out, and then send you a list. So it's going to be a big breakthrough. It's going to help to get more of the cloud and edge sort of systems in there to your risk reporting, so you can see what's going on with your network. So we're really excited, new features and things like that. So again, sign up to the mailing list, and you'll see why after we go through some of this, why you signed us up. This is like one of the most important tools to let you know there's something at risk on your network that you need to fix right away, because Shadowserver is really aggressive on like putting the alert out and putting the tools so you can actually plug up a risk before the bad guys use it. It's a race. New vulnerability comes out, it's a race. You got to get it patched before they exploit, right? And then it's also posted on social media. So you sign up to the different social media. X, InfoSec on the exchange, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, sign up there, and then sign up to the YouTube channel, because as I mentioned here, there's a lot of different YouTube videos are coming out. Some of them are like specific, like, Intel MQ. How do you integrate with that? How do you plug Shadowserver into Grafana? How do you get Shadowserver into Splunk? Right? So we're going to be talking a lot of different ways of how to do it. So now, who is Shadowserver? So Shadowserver, been around for 20 years. It's critical to the core of the infrastructure, whether you know it or not. Ironically, a lot of the different companies you may go to say get threat intelligence, when you lift up the hood and you look underneath, the threat intelligence they're actually leveraging is coming off of Shadowserver or Shadowserver tools. That's really an irritant to the nonprofit community, where you have people monetizing something that is a nonprofit effort. Shadowserver's ability to give you and get you these cyber civil defense tools, these reports that doesn't cost you anything to go out there, subscribe, use, and protect your network, is supported by different organizations and governments. That's part of the Shadowserver Alliance. So they fund the core infrastructure, the platform we'll be talking about, and that keeps that platform working so that you can go out there and say, okay, I'm going to start, using it to protect my network. So that, it clears the path, because what we want is that action. You help and protect your network. Now, what threats are we focused on? You name it. Shadowserver works on all these different threats, right? So it's a whole gamut. So this isn't like a specific, we just only work on DDoS, or we only work on spam, or we work, Shadowserver is the whole gamut of the different threat targets. And then when you look at it, the infrastructure we got sinkholes, scan-in, sensors, sandboxes. These are all core tools. In future webinars, we'll go through, like, what is a sinkhole? How does it work? How can you participate? What's scan-in? How does the scan-in methodology work? Right? Our scan-in methodology is the only one that does V6. people say, wait a minute, V6. V6 is huge. How do you scan V6? Well, we got some secret sauce of how we figured out how to find the V6 that are alive and scan only for those. All the sensor platforms, so we can see what the bad guys are actually trying to knock on doors and do things, right? And the sandboxes, we got one of the biggest malware repository analysis engines on the planet. If you are capturing binaries, if you're a security researcher doing that, if you're not looking, plugged into Shadowserver sandboxes, you're missing out. But see, we then take all those reports here and we put it into different components to get you different reporting. So these kind of group together into like, how do we do the malware analysis? How do we do the sync-colon? How do we do investigations with law enforcement? That sort of work. And this is all funneled in, right, to a report that's updated every single day. So every single day you get a refresh of what's happening on your network. You put in your autonomous system numbers, you put in your domain names, you put in the IP address blocks, and every day you get this report. You start out with email, so you make sure it works. Then you get your API keys and you plug it into any of your API tools, right? And multiple API keys, right? Here's an API key for Grafana. Here's an API key for Splunk. Here's an API key for Maltego. Here's an API key for IP, Intel MQ, right? So this is how you set things up. So the organizations that I go out there and I see who do not have problems, and Shadowserver is part of their telemetry tool. It's not the only one, right, that they use, but this is kind of like the anchor, because why pay for something that Shadowserver provides you as a public benefit service, right? That's the key thing. Why pay for something that you have Shadowserver delivering it in a higher quality, higher fidelity with a faster speed, right? So don't just take my word for it. There's a whole bunch of different companies who keep on saying like, yes, this Shadowserver is like one of the, it saves our butt with it. And I should put one of my quotes in there, right? So you can see each one of these, right? Different, testimonials that, Shadowserver is like key, right? To protecting the whole infrastructure. A story with me is back in, what was it? About 2009, I'm at Juniper Networks, and I come in the morning and I get my email report on from Shadowserver, and I got 19 computers infected with MedBroot. That's a boot sector virus. It's nasty. In other words, they got through all my defenses. We did everything we can think of at Juniper, and Juniper's a security company, and they still get in. All right, those 19 computers, we immediately went out there, pulled them off the network, no lateral movement, did the investigation. That saved me so much money, all from a Shadowserver report, right? From a sinkhole report. So we watched through it. This is why Shadowserver, when you go through it, one of our peer organizations, Vulncheck, right? They're a commercial operation. They give tools to actually get you alerted and things like that with it. They were looking out there and says, okay, who's number one out there? And one of the reasons they partnered with us is they went like, Shadowserver gets the alerts out faster of known exploits than any other organization on the internet. Faster than the US government, faster than Google, faster than Palo Alto, faster than Microsoft. So look at you look in there, those little security companies that say, hey, we get the Shadowserver gets the word out. Why? Is because we're plugged into alliance members, and plugged into all the different national CERT teams, the law enforcement organizations, security trust groups, the hackers, different companies leverage us, vendors leverage us. So there's a whole bunch of organizations who trust Shadowserver. That's the key thing with it. And this trust allows us to actually get to you. Here's like, patch this quick, right? That's the whole approach of it, right? With tons and tons of data, right? The amount of data that's put together in the platform. And this is what's funded by the Shadowserver Alliance. Shadowserver's Alliance is funded in this massive platform that then delivers to you the tools of organizations around the world, gets you the details you need to help secure your network, right? So one thing to also remember, if Shadowserver sees it, the bad guys see it. If Shadowserver sees it, the bad guys see it, all right? So if it pops up on your Shadowserver report, you look at it, you go like, do I really need to fix this right now? Just be mindful that the bad guy also knows that you have simple network management protocol open on your network. You have Telnet open on your network. You have vulnerable devices from different vendors open on your network, They will exploit. It's really frustrating, you know, in Shadowserver to see where we put out an alert and say, here is a vulnerability, go patch this now. And then we see an active exploit, our sensors light up and that people are starting to use it. And we tell everybody, they're using it, patch this now. And we look at the percentage across through our dashboard and we say like, why aren't people patching it? And then break-ins. It's really frustrating to see that. It's preventable. A lot of the break-ins that happen on the internet today from ransomware, APT, and things like that are preventable just using Shadowserver. Let me say that again. Most of the stuff happening on the internet today are preventable. The bad guys can't get in just by using Shadowserver data and fixing the things that Shadowserver shows you. And how much does that cost you? Time. It's the time to sign up. It's the time to go out there and fix it. Doesn't cost you like, you know, millions of dollars to pay for, you know, intelligence. So let's walk through some of this stuff. We're going to walk through several of these alerts. As I mentioned, if you sign up to the public mailing list, you get an alert and say, here's something going on. Here's something going on. It comes into your mailbox, right? And so you can go out there and, okay, let me check my report in here. And what you'll get is an email. So here's an email from the mailing list and it says, okay, here's the PNP infected malware. Here's the details of who disclosed it, right? We point to who is the finder, the discloser with it. Here's how you can see it on our public dashboard, right? You know, most of the stuff is still vulnerable. We'll give a little comment, right? And then you plug into it, and then here's the links to it, and go fix it, right? That's the key thing with it. So this is all about us going after and disrupting the cybercrime. So let's take that PNP one that we talked about, right? So this one comes out, it's off of readers, right? And there are companies in the Philippines who have this. They're vulnerable to this, right? And so this particular vendor put out, you know, here's the infection. This is one of the things that kind of went up and went down. So in other words, people used it and then they not used it and now they're using it again. And so this is public off of here. This is the irony to this is that redress should be being fixed, and it's not being fixed. It's actually, there's more vulnerable devices out there since the first advisories went out. So we're going the wrong direction, right? It should be going down, not going up, right? So this is our problem with it, right? In the advisories we put out there, here's what you should do. The vendor redress says, here's what you do. Please follow our practices. So one of the things that if you are a vendor or you're a systems integrator, you can work with Shadowserver and says, okay, let's use this reporting to find out which of our customers are infected, and let's use this as a mechanism to go reach out and help them get fixed, right? So that's one of the things that you join the Shadowserver Alliance for, is you say, okay, I'm going to join the Shadowserver Alliance, say, hey, Shadowserver, let's work together. We need to get this fixed, right? So this is one of the funding mechanisms. Now, what we do with all this, you can see here, we got a special report on the readers report, right? So you get the details of it. You see where you find the data in your report, where you find the data in the API, right? So that's one example. Let's take MoveIt. MoveIt's going up and down, right? You know, and Shadowserver has been right there since it came out with it. So there's another one that happened, right? This year, you know, MoveIt's not over. All right. And so the advisory comes out with there. And this particular one, Watchtower Labs, they found something. And what's really cool, this is one of the things we highly encourage, is they use responsible disclosure. So responsible disclosure is where you just don't go out there and blab it. You actually work. So Watchtower Labs worked with the MoveIt team, right? And signed it and said, okay, here's the advisory. Advisory comes out. But you can see right here, what's interesting is when you look at these exposed systems, these are exposed MoveIt systems. So these, sometimes when we set up our telemetry at Shadowserver, sometimes we can say, this is vulnerable. In other words, we have a little test, we can figure out it's vulnerable, or if it's exposed. So MoveIt is one of those things that you should lock down and not have it exposed where anybody can actually knock on its door. All right. So this is like the number of systems out there where people can knock on the door, right? It shouldn't be out there, right? And so we got the reporting for the MoveIt part, right? Now let's take a different angle. Shadowserver works with law enforcement all over the world. So 9/11 S5, right? 9/11 S5 is one of a list of a whole bunch of work that Shadowserver has been doing with law enforcement. In this particular case, FBI led an operation to take down this one VPN system that was put out there for criminals to use, right? So it's a VPN that criminals use to break into places. And it was a multi-country effort, including the person who was running it was actually living in Singapore, the Singapore police, thinking of ASEAN, and then the police in Thailand and several other countries in ASEAN helped out with the takedown operation. Now, what was this? All right, so what the criminals did is they say, okay, we need to build our own VPN, and we got to convince people to load up software. So what we'll do is we'll do a free VPN service, right? Because we know that somebody can be sitting in the Philippines behind a firewall, and we just had the European football championship going on, right? And people said, oh man, I'm bored. The firewall prevents me to go watch the match in Europe. I'm going to download this free VPN. And this free VPN will allow me to bypass the firewall and connect up and watch the match in Europe and get around the geo-blocking. So I get around the geo-blocking and I get through my firewall. Hey, this is cool. And it's free. It's a free VPN. This is really cool. And I just downloaded a backdoor that the criminals can use to get into my organization, or use that to actually break into other organizations. That's what this VPN is. This is all over the internet, right? This VPN system, right? So this is kind of like the summary of what happened with it. Now, what the law enforcement will do, in this case, the FBI, they went out there and says, okay, we confiscated the infrastructure and say, hey, Shadowserver, the FBI guys they're not running this operational infrastructure. So they say, Shadowserver, you do the sinkhole. You take the sinkhole, now you got all the proxies and all the other third-party software that was where this backdoor was installed, which was still finding all the list of the different backdoors they put in to build this 9/11 S5 proxy network. And that all goes to the sinkhole. Then that returns into you to let you know which devices on your network actually have this on your network. So you get a report. Right. And so the data is shared in these reports where you can look in there 9/11 SOX 5 proxy, and then you'll find out which devices are in there. And there's a lot of different places out there that have, still, this deployed out there. Now, here's the thing. Yes, it's sinkhole. Yes, the bad guys are arrested. But it's somebody inside your network who downloaded something to bypass and put a backdoor into your network. So if that person did that, what else are they doing? They're at risk to your network, which is why you want to go out there and hunt them down. So me as a security professional, and we got a lot of them in Southeast Asia. There's over 1,000 of these still in the Philippines right now, right? So you can pull down the report, look for that. That could be one of your exercises, and you can go to your boss and say, hey, we just cleaned this off our network. We had a couple of people loading up this free VPN, and they downloaded this and they downloaded this and downloaded this. They were basically, we prevented a breach because somebody could have used that to get into the network, right? So this is an example of using it. Another law enforcement action, Europol, they did another takedown, and this is a different type. So the SOX 11 proxy, Shadowserver did the sinkhole and then provide others, here's data sets. In this one, other organization in Europe did the sinkhole and then provide Shadowserver the details. And so we're getting things like the smoke loader malware, right? And so this is like an example. If you pull down a report, this is off of a network in Malaysia where I kind of like sanitized it so we don't embarrass anybody, right? And you can see that here's the different devices there that have smoke loader loaded up. So this organization was interesting. This is an enterprise, a financial services company, and a whole bunch of devices in there infected with smoke loader, right? It's a ransomware waiting to happen. It's an APT waiting to happen. It's a breach waiting to happen, right? So these sort of smoke loader is one of the malware you can start getting off your network. And notice this: Philippines is #1 with smoke loader. There's a bunch of organizations who have smoke loader loaded up inside their network, right? And so Operation Endgame, they keep on coming out. There's like 5 of them now that they keep on saying, okay, we took down this, we took down this, we took down this. So this is an ongoing law enforcement operation. Now you get all this. Now how do you plug in, right? So you get all this and say, okay, Food, how do I plug in? You go to shadowserver.org. you look at the top right, it says subscribe, and you subscribe. And we're going to ask you for things like who you are, what your organization is, email address, your network, and things like that. You'll get a form like this, and you fill it in. If that doesn't work for some reason, because sometimes some people go like, okay, this isn't working, you just send it to contacts. You just, in contacts, you send an email and says, here's all my details. We open up a ticket, we get a ticket, and we start setting you up with a autonomous system report, an IP address report, and a domain name report. Those are the three key things you start with. And that will start getting you the email reports with it. Now, who gets this data? So Shadowserver has always been different because, and the reason why law enforcement trusts Shadowserver is we don't sell data. We don't give data to anybody who wants it, right? Your data is your data, right? So we're scanning your network. We're doing analysis on your network. We're finding sinkholes from devices inside your network. We don't give that to anybody. So if you got somebody sitting left of you and right of you as an organization, you got competitors, they don't get that data, only you do. So that's why we're very particular with it, right? You know, who gets that data. The only exception to that are national CSIRTs. So if you're a validated national CSIRT linked to the government, doing open CSIRT specifications, the SIM3 specifications to make sure the data is secure, then those are the sort of things that we say, okay, the national CSIRT gets the entire country. Because then they will use that data to go out there and knock on doors inside the country. So national CSIRTs can go out there and say, hey, you got smoke alerter on your network, can you clean it up? And they can contact you, right? So this is one of the primary sources that the national CSIRTs get data from is from Shadowserver. So they understand what's out there. So if the national CSIRT isn't calling you up, you may want to talk to the national CSIRTs in the Philippines and say, well, how come you're not calling me up and letting us know that something's vulnerable in my network, right? Everything is API'd. So one of the things that happened about 5 years ago is Shadowserver did a big transition and they API'd everything, right? So you start with the email reports, but once you got the emails going and you say, okay, now I'm getting reports on my network, it could be a lot of information and you want to shift over to APIs because then you have better tools, you have graphics, you can put things in your NOC and SOC, you can put things in the Altigo and Grafana and things like that. Right. And so it just makes it much, much easier to do things. So you take everything in API stuff. And again, remember, anything Shadowserver sees, the bad guys can easily see it too, because Shadowserver is an outside in, even though there's telemetry with sinkholes that bad guys don't have, you just got to assume the bad guys see this stuff. Now, to make it easier for you, one of the reports we have on our dashboard. So if you go to dashboard.shadowserver.org, you know, one of the things we have out there is a list of exploit vulnerabilities. So Shadowserver started before CISA, the US government, known exploited vulnerabilities list, all right? And there's a tab down there for CISA. That's probably going to be changing by the end of the year because multiple countries are going to be using the same approach. Which vulnerabilities are at risk? So you have a hierarchy of like what the risk is, whether it's critical or high or information or whatever. And then if it's active exploit, go get it fixed before somebody actually exploits you, right? So CISA has a government, CISA as a government authority has the ability to tell all the US government agencies, you have to get this fixed by this time period. So those government agencies, they don't have to get a special commercial service. They just come here and they look and they say, okay, what's the CISA KEV list? And that's the ones, and those are the ones they have to go get fixed. And then they look at their reports for the CVE and they go out there and get it fixed. And each one of these out there, if you look over the side on actions and chart and map, there's a bunch of stuff out there. Now, how much of this is you know, out there on the reports? You know, we're going to do another webinar, you know, a regional webinar on the dashboard so people can start playing around the dashboard. So this is public information. Now, sinkholes. Sinkholes is, again, we're taking down bad guy malware, botnets, you know, APT, threat actor infrastructure, things like that, right? So these are all devices in ASEAN that have been infected and they have been compromised and they're on your network. Right? If you have anything that's popping up into a Shadowserver sinkhole, you need to go get it fixed because it's a device that's sitting there and it's going to be exploited by a smart bad guy. A smart bad guy will go out there and find the same device and go like, oh, This is my backdoor into the network. I'm in the network, right? So, and they're right there, right? It's like free, right? As I said, like me at Juniper Networks, Mebroot, 19 computers, immediately pull them on my network, fixed it, right? So it doesn't matter how much security you put in, a smart bad guy is going to figure out a way to get into your network. So it's a matter of speed. How fast can you do it, right? Here's another area, right? Scans. We're doing the scans. And what's interesting in the ASEAN data is like Singapore's at risk. Usually, people go like, oh, Singapore. I'm sitting in Singapore right now. Singapore is really locked down. So you look at it, there's a lot of risk. This is scans of risk. So these are risks. These are vulnerabilities and on the network, or protocols that should not be exposed in the network. So these are risk areas that are seen. That's a lot of risk out there, right? So you can go out there and plug it, like simple network management protocol, and plug it out there, right? And there's more out there of risk. So you got DDoS amplification that's being used. So we see all the DDoS amplifiers out there, right? That's part of the data we get. OT infrastructure. Thanks to European Union, several years ago, Shadowserver was commissioned to actually start doing OT sort of stuff. And this is one of the projects we're working on, getting some more funders as part of the Shadowserver Alliance to put more tools out there to put these sort of tools, looking for OT. OT devices should never, ever appear out there, right? Then we got websites that are compromised. See that? Philippines, lots and lots of websites are compromised, right? So those are things you want to like go out there and look on my network. Do I have a website that's compromised, and go get it fixed, right? So let's give an example of this. Let's take sinkholes in the Philippines, right? So sinkholes, again, remember, these are like the 911 S5, right? So you go out there with the 911 S5 and you say, okay, we got, 20,000 devices in the Philippines that actually are coming into the Shadowserver sinkholes, right? So I say, okay, let me get my Shadowserver report. What do I do, right? So I need to go out there and find these. I can't let them get reinfected, right? So I went out there and pulled from one of the organizations, right? And in that organization, I went through and said, okay, let's go through and see what they have. So I sanitize this, right? So we don't want to embarrass anybody. But what you get in the report that's emailed to you is you'll get like, here's the timestamp. The timestamp, specific timestamp is really important. Make sure your clocks, your NTP, that's probably a Shadowserver tool we'll do later on. So make sure your clock synchronization is there, because you'll take that timestamp and look at your firewalls, and look at your carrier grade NAT, and you say, okay, where's the port details? Because we give you the details, and believe me, I've used it. When I was doing mobile networking and using Shadowserver and mobile networks, I use that, all right? With the timestamp, and I was able to get through the logs, so I could find out who's really infected. And you see in here, it's like we get down to the details. Here's, because based off the IP address and all the telemetry Shadowserver collects, we say, okay, here's the particular city. Here's the device type. Here's the severity. It's critical, right? And so you notice on the top, I've hidden a whole bunch of fields. There's a whole bunch of other information in there, right? I just did this so we can actually see the impact of it, and you can see the infection. There's an ad loader infection that's tagged as a vulnerable, right? There's a 911 S5 proxy. There's a, right? So this particular network, major network in the Philippines, they have a whole bunch of stuff that get cleaned up, right? A whole bunch of stuff that get cleaned up, right? So this is an example of how to use it. You go from the bigger report here, right? This is kind of like for the whole country, and you get down to your specific organization and get it fixed. So we're going to have future sessions on, and this is why to sign up to the YouTube channel and watch out for the webinars, where we get into more of these sort of examples. How do I use Shadowserver to actually get things cleaned up with it? Or because we want to get these infected devices cleaned up, right? The bad guys will find these, and they'll go out there and say, I can get into that organization, right? So this is part of us rethinking. Let's do some rethinking of cybersecurity, right? Because everything I talked about here, this is not really hard to do. This is best common practices. You don't need to pay anybody, right? All this stuff is kind of like, free to use. So let me go back many years. As I said, I've used Shadowserver, I'm working inside of Shadowserver right now, but I've been a big consumer and user of Shadowserver. So I go back to my time period in Indonesia. So here, I'm coming into Indonesia and we're going to take a cell phone company, turn around and get it ready for 4G. So I'm working with the entire team. I go to my boss and say, okay, I got Chinese state actors, US state actors, Iranian state actors. I got criminals all over my network. I got people doing all this stuff. We did build a security team. He says, well, we don't have money for a security team right now. We have to figure out a different way. Let's go turn the company around first. Say, okay, what do I do? Hey, I get college grads coming in. We got a college graduate recruiting program. I'm going to take 2 of these college graduates and say, you're going to be security gurus. And I took this the Shadowserver report. And we took 1 Shadowserver report a week, and I taught them how to say, okay, let's figure out Telnet. Let's figure out SNMP. And we come up with the procedures. We went out there and fixed one, then fixed one, then fixed one. And they're learning along the way. Within 6 months, these 2 kids, right, fresh out of college, they were teaching me things about how to secure the network, right? Because we didn't try to boil the ocean. We didn't try to fix too many things. We just fixed 1 thing a week, right? Because Shadowserver provides all these details, and there's a community that they can plug into. So it's teaching them how to ask questions. That's one of the most important things you can do, growing up in this, it's ASEAN, is to learn how to ask questions of other people, right? And they ask the questions and they go out there and figure these things out, right? And basically the process is quite simple. They pick a report, review the risk, mitigate the risk. They write a little policy to make sure we don't have a repeat, because it's usually a configuration error or the vendor didn't do things right. People say, oh, this is the vendor's job. No, it's your job to get the vendor to do it. Yes, you want to blame the vendor, but actually it's your job to police the vendor to make sure they do the right thing. So, maybe that'll be a session to teach you how to do vendor stuff. Now, if it's been there for a while, then you got to look deeper. And this is where we found different state actors and got state actors off the network, because we go out there and find something else and find something else. And they did teaching them how to do investigations. But then at the end of the week, started a new one, started a new one each week, right? And we started with the critical and high ones of the risk and just started working our way down. But actually in the beginning, we actually started with a very, 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 very simple, right? The first one I had them do was simple network management protocol. And when I was building these slides several years ago, I was working for a company and I went there and pulled the SNMP report. And I go like, why do we have, wait a minute, we are a big company. We shouldn't be having SNMP open. And SNMP is there, but it gave me a good example, because you look on here, if you leave simple network management protocol open on your network, and believe me, there's a lot of organizations in the Philippines who have a simple network management protocol open, wide open right there, because if it's open, I can then query. And what do I get? I get the version number. I get the device name. I go out there and say, oh, Cisco Catalyst 4500 L3 switch. Here's the version of the software. Oh, let me go look at the Cisco PCert. Oh yeah, this is vulnerable. Okay, let me go find an exploit. Ah, there's exploit. I'm in. US government jumped up and down because they go out there and says, oh, look, living off the land. Chinese threat actors are living off the land. What are they doing? They're using simple network management protocol, finding the version number and going in. It's not rocket science to a bad guy. And it's also not rocket science to everybody listening to this and go, okay, I need to clean this up, because it's right there public. Simple network management protocol should never be publicly exposed on your network. It should be locked down, right? So this sort of preventive maintenance, this is what we call, like in my military days, back in the 80s, I was in US Air Force, and we were always graded on the preventive maintenance inspection. How were we doing our PMIs? PMIs, what do you call it? Preventive maintenance inspection, because the US Air Force knew that if any unit was not having their team taking care of the radar systems and the aircraft and the engines and making sure the preventive maintenance is being done, the unit was not ready and there was going to have a problem. And that's the same thing with security. These simple things are so critical. People not doing these simple things is why you're getting hospitals broken into, why you got the big break-in down in Indonesia. Simple things is how the bad guys got in, all right? And what's it cost you? You take some time, you go to Shadowserver, sign up for the reports, and you start taking one at a time and start fixing it, right? Because all this information here is provided to you, paid for by the Shadowserver Alliance to get you the free reporting. Because if you're taking care of your network, then all the internet is at less risk. That's why the Shadowserver Alliance exists out there. This plug-in with the community. So again, don't try to boil ocean. If you've signed up the report and you see tons of information, don't panic. Just pick one. Pick the simple ones. Pick SNMP and Telnet and get those fixed. Fix a couple. Because what happens if you show this to your bosses and your bosses go like, holy cow, we got, thousands and thousands of things I got to get fixed. What happens is as you keep on adding goals, you don't get anything done. Right. So if you show, hey, this is what we're getting from the Shadowserver reports, we can save a lot of money and we can do this. And your boss says, oh, fix it all at once. I go, wait, we'll fix one this week. We'll fix one the next week. We'll fix one the third week. Then you get it done, right? Then you got this rhythm of action to getting it done, because this is this compound tiny gains, the power of tiny gains, right? If you try to do too much, it doesn't happen. But if you do a little bit, and it's consistent, and it starts compounding, then there's the risk reduction compounds. This is the key thing with it. All right. So your excuses are gone. You have free reporting, shows the risk. If the bad guy goes in and uses a RDP to get in, or uses SNMP to get in, or uses Telnet to get into the network, or uses NTP or something like that, some of these known exploit risks, or when Shadowserver says, here's all the open Microsoft Exchange that are vulnerable, that is open on the network, and the bad guys break in, guess what? No excuse. You can't say I'm ignorant. The tools are right there. So then you turn around, right? Ask your teams. If you're an executive to listen to this, ask your teams, how are you leveraging Shadowserver tools? If you have vendors, this is Southeast Asia, there's a lot of like, I want to choke the vendor. I want to choke the vendor. I want to keep, blame it on the vendor. Well, then you turn around to the vendor and say, okay, what are you doing? Hey, vendors, are you part of the Shadowserver Alliance? Why are you not part of the Shadowserver Alliance? Why are you not setting things up and using these reports? So you turn around to the vendor and say, you need to be part of the Shadowserver Alliance. You put it as an RFP requirement, because you say to the vendor, why do I pay you for threat intelligence when you're not using the Shadowserver Alliance data? All right. Use the Shadowserver Alliance data first, and then we'll look at your extras and see if your extras are really worth it. But in the meantime, you should be supporting this. Otherwise, what you are about as a vendor is trying to just make money off of my risk. No. Let's reduce the risk. I can get a lot of my risk reduced. Then you talk to your service providers. Say, hey, in the Philippines, okay, Smart, Globe, all the others, what are you doing with the Shadowserver reporting? Are you taking care of your network? Am I at risk because you are not doing anything to protect your network? Okay, those are things to ask. Ask them about BGP security, because most of the operators in the Philippines are not protecting their BGP sessions. And so it's very easy to actually take out all of the Philippine infrastructure with low-level DDoS attacks, right? Very easy to do, right? And that's all right there on Shadowserver reports as an example with it. So thank you for everybody listening. On the recording side, we're going to actually go and pause this. And thank you for attending. The details of theirs, slides of theirs. For those of you who are online with us right now, thank you very much. Stay tuned. We're going to turn off the recording, and then people can start asking questions.